right.
Oh, it's a good one.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good evening. I assure you that we can start right now. So you may have seen this image before. It's quite famous. One of the James Webb Space Telescope is capturing image in infrared, and you can see the characteristic star shapes, the six-pointed star. So like when we compare to the next image, what is it? There we go. So this is a Hubble image. As you can see, the characteristic four-pointed star. So like when we were children, we always think stars are four-pointed. It's because of Hubble. And now our children will think stars would be six-pointed. So for me, this is my favorite image because it combines two different spectrum of light, which is infrared, which is what we know as heat, and then X-ray, the thing that you get from the doctor, for bone scans. So apparently, stars do emit both infrared, that's why they're hot, and X-ray because they're nuclear fusion. So when you combine the images together, this is what you get. So I show you some of these pictures. Can you tell what's the difference between this picture and the one before? Anyone? So this image right here is from Andromeda. I taken it from Plattsfield Park, and then all of these three I taken it right outside there. So Manchester skies, no matter how horrible it is, you can do astrophotography, and quite decent as well for the Orion picture there, and then Jupiter. So this is the heaven in your hands, the Astrophotography Workshop. So the reason why we're doing this, we have the competition going on by week 10. So by week 10, we're going to decide who are the winners. So I'm trying to bring down the barrier to entry by making this workshop. So when is the right time for us to do astrophotography? So I want to show you a weather app, and this is the two that I would recommend using. So this is Astronomy Scene. It shows you very critical information like rain, fog, and then clouds. But we can go that in depth later on. So what happens if you don't go out at the right time? That's the skies that you're dealing with. So you can't image stuff. And these are the sites that I would recommend. So clear outside, meteor blue, and then dark sky, but it's been acquired by Apple, so no more dark sky. That was the best one, but capitalism. Okay, so from the weather app, what are we looking for? So the first thing would be the face of the moon. So if you want to take pictures of the moon, try to find the right face for you. It could be a crescent moon, it could be a full moon, it could be during the total lunar eclipse where you could see the blood moon. And then next would be the time of dawn and dusk. So this changes depending on which quarter are you taking a picture. So as we get closer to summer, you would expect that black band there becomes narrower because we have less night compared to probably winter where we have most night. And then cloud cover. So what you're looking for would be basically zeros all the way, but that's not realistic. So I would recommend look on high clouds. If it's clear, any break in the cloud, that's literally just space. And then next weather. So weather here simply shows you temperature and wind speed, because sometimes when you go outside to take a picture, the temperature might drop. Like right now, you can hear the winds are going insane. So So another thing that you should account for, especially in Manchester, would be flight path. So you should look out where aircraft go, so that when you point your camera, it wouldn't ruin your shot. And then where. So if you ever want to plan for your trips, or maybe you want to know how to get a better picture from the place that you live. So my recommendation would be, if you're in the city, point away from the city. So right now we're south of Manchester, right? So pointing south is better. So I can show you, yeah. So that picture on the right would be the south picture, and then if you point north, that's literally the city, and you can see the difference of the brightness there. So shooting through less light is better, because you want to see your object in the night sky. So why does this happen? It's because of architecture. So different type of light pollutes the sky different ways. So have you ever been on an aircraft on a final approach at night? So during the landing phase, right? So if you can see the roads, that's good. But if you can see the individual lights on the roads, that's bad. And most of the time you can see that pinpoint light source, right? So that means most places, especially the city, is bad for astro. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. So if you ever want to plan your trips, this is you should look out for something called light pollution map. So it is a whole database and a map where it shows you where is the darker sky. So like you can see London, Manchester, Liverpool. I think that's Birmingham. So the brighter colors are bad because it's really bright. So if you live somewhere outside from Manchester, like the outskirts, it should be far better. So usually this database use something called a bottle scale, meaning lower is better. From 8 and 9, basically that's Manchester and London, and then all the way down to bottle 1, which is somewhere like where you have hundreds of kilometers of no light, meaning even the roads you don't have light. Maybe they advise you for houses to turn off lights at night for hundreds of kilometers. That only happens in like a few places in the world, and that's the one that I've been to is Lake Tekapu in New Zealand. So what they have there is, if you go outside and you look up, you can see the galaxy without any aid. So I would recommend, if any one of you ever want to visit a dark sky site, keep an eye out, or maybe stay up late and look at probably meteors coming by. Would be cool. And then Bottle 5 is the most common one. So if you find a city that's not as bright, it's usually referring to Bottle 5. And here are the two results. So Andromeda on the left is from Manchester, and the one on the right, that's the Milky Way from Cambridge. So you might be asking yourself, how do you take the pretty pictures? So everyone has a smartphone, insane amount of cameras these days. It's so amazing what they can do, and some manufacturers go even above and beyond by attaching a camera lens on the phone. So the things that you might have heard in the market would be this phone has 108 megapixels, 200 megapixels, or probably the recent iPhone, 48 megapixels. And then they always brag about how big their sensors are, capturing has better lower light performance. And maybe you've seen something called an f1.8 or f2.8 before. And then the last thing would be the wide telephoto and ultra wide. So I want to highlight the last point there. Usually when you open your camera app, that's your wide camera. And then if you want to take an ultra wide shot, that's the 0.5x. So basically you see as wide as possible. And then telephoto is the first number that's not 0.5 or 1. So if you see a number that's more than 1, so maybe 2x or 3x, that's your native sensor resolution, meaning it doesn't crops into the sensor. So that's the full quality. Because usually, something that people usually miss out, even though your phone can zoom to like probably 100x, what it does is, your sensor is this big, but it crops into like probably 1% of it, and then somehow use AI to scale it up. Which in Astro, you can't do that. You just can't, because that's not data. So something that you might heard of very recently with smartphones would be night mode, or probably astrophotography mode, or probably stargazing mode. So right now, in your hands or probably in your pocket, you have tools built into your phone to take pictures of the night sky. And I should go through what's important in astrophotography when it comes to like taking a picture. So this is the hierarchy. Your base would be focusing. So focusing would be the most important. Then we work with exposure time and ISO. So focusing. If the image is not focused, there's no point. You can't see the stars. So what does that look like? So when you go into your manual mode or your pro mode in a smartphone and try to focus, usually they have this fringing, probably green, red or blue, just to highlight where are you focused on. So if you, can you guys see the green part? Alright. So the green highlights here indicate that I'm focused from here to all the way to the back wall. So you can do that with stars, but what you expect is that green would be somewhere around the stars right here. Because if it's not in focus, you can see the stars. First, the color is not great, and then second, it's not as sharp, so it becomes a big blob. Maybe for people who don't pixel peep, it doesn't matter. Like for example, if you take landscape astrophotography, meaning Milky Way pictures, right? It shouldn't matter as much, but I would recommend getting it sharp because the dust is not as bright, and if you get in focus, you should be able to get the dust out a bit more than what you would expect. So now let's go to exposure time. So in Astro, exposure time is king. So more time is better. So if you take a picture at night, this is what you would expect. It's quite dark, you can't see stuff, the colors are off. But as you push your exposure time to maximum, probably 30 seconds or 4 minutes sometimes, you see that your pictures are too bright. So meaning, even though it's king, that doesn't mean it's good to have all of it. So in moderation, you get something like this. So the colors are nice, the contrast is okay, and there's enough detail in there that you don't lose anything on either side. So you just play around. Like, it sounds like a joke where if you want to take a picture, whatever looks nice, right? But apparently in Astro, whatever looks nice is the best thing. Because if it's sharp, it looks nice. If it's bright enough, it looks nice. So the last thing would be ISO, or in certain cameras they call it gain. So what does gain looks like? So this is a high gain picture, and that's a low gain picture. You might not be able to see it, but I zoomed it in. So this is the noise pattern that you would expect from your camera. So at higher ISO or higher gain, you can see the random hot pixels and cold pixels, the pink hue, the blue bit. So we don't want that. We don't want that. But at lower ISO, your sensor is not as sensitive. So your pictures would be darker, but it would be much more smooth and more sharp by comparison. So as long as you stay somewhere in between, you should be fine and you should produce a great image.
Excuse me.
Yes?
May I have a question?
Yes.
If I want to find a star, how to focus it?
Focus?
Yeah.
Hold on. So you were talking about this thing right here, focusing. So usually on the camera, right? What you're looking for is, because the phone these days are good enough that the moment you see any star and then it must out have that green highlight, it should be in focus. You can't get perfect focus, but it should be close enough that it would be good. Because stars on the phone is quite small. But that's one of the challenges that we can go through, and sometimes you play with the settings because there's no risk here. There's no risk. If you take a picture, it's not just one picture. You could always try again until you get the right settings, because great things, great art takes time, and I hope you can invest some time, at least more than 2 shots probably, to take the picture, and then you just compare with yourself. You can pixel peep and see which setting is the best for you. Because I can't cater to every single permutation of hardware, but as long as you know the basics, you should be good for yourself, and you may help others soon enough, right? Okay, so we've been here. So things that apply to both smartphone and cameras would be star trailing. So maybe you get the exposure right, but you start seeing your stars to trail a bit. So meaning, no matter how hard you try to focus, it has a little bit of a tail there. So that tail is called star trailing. So this is an extreme example. Or maybe if you're into this, you could try stack the images together to make a trailing image. But if you want sharp stars, if you're talking about deep sky astro, you need to adhere to 2 rules. Well, the 2 most famous ones, because it helps you. That's the 500 rule and the NPF rule. So if you want sharp stars, I think the simplest would be the 500 rule. It simply means that the number 500 divided by your focal length. Usually, most smartphone cameras, they put out a focal length value during when they sell inside the spec sheet, basically. So usually that number is already equivalent to what cameras see. So that's what the crop factor means, because crop factor is like an artifact from the photography side, because sensor size and everything. But you shouldn't worry, because whatever millimeter value that you get from the spec sheet of your phone, that's equivalent to what a camera would see. So for example, most cameras on a phone would be around 24, 25 millimeters. So 500 divided by 25, you get, how much is that? Around 20 seconds, if I was not mistaken. So 20 seconds per shot for you to get sharp stars before it trails. I mean 21, 20, 15, you might not tell the difference, but that would be more important in the later section of this presentation. So once you know the 500 rule, this is like the list of different exposure time that you should expect for your setup. As the focal length gets longer, you have to take shorter exposures so that it doesn't trail. The reason why we want longer focal length so that the small objects in the sky becomes bigger, but there's a trade-off there, and you might have to find that out yourself what works for you. And then that's a normal MPF calculator that you should be able to find online. Everything is free. Don't worry about payoff. So once you start taking pictures, you might ask yourself, why are your pictures not as good as what you see online? I would say comparison is the tip of joy, but there is some truth to comparing what you do and what you should get. And so the 2 possibilities would be, you shoot in JPEG or like any compressed form. So if you take a normal picture on your phone, it's usually in a compressed form, meaning it's small and easy to share with your friends and family. But it has its limitation in Astro because a lot of the data that you want isn't there. And then a second possibility would be you're taking a single image. And we can go through both. So let's go through JPEG. So let's say you take this picture in JPEG. You can't really do much, but if you take in raw form, it could reach there. This is the same picture, but you process it a bit to make sure to bring out the true beauty of what you have caught. Sometimes you can't reach your full potential of the system that you have. It's because there's little minute things that you need to do. So let's go through this together. So if you look at this image and put it into an editing software, you might see something called a histogram, which looks something like that on the right. And it's describing the brightness of the pixel. So from left to right will be the darkest pixel to the brightest pixel. And then that's your data, that's spike. And then on the vertical axis, it's trying to tell you how many pixels are bright or dark. So in this particular case, you can see most of, as you can see, you really can't because it's quite dark, right? So that shows in the histogram, that's why the peak is so far to the left, meaning it's not that bright. But if you stretch it a bit, you get something like this, and you can start to see the colors trying to separate itself. But stretching an image shows you a bit of detail, but you can see the colors a bit off, and there's a bit of hazy or like gray area there that you do not want. But you can start to differentiate between the brightest pixels and the darker pixels. And you can experiment this how many times you want. You can make it overstretch or understretch and play around. But once you bump up the contrast and the saturation, this is the image that you will get. So the difference between this image and this image, look at the peaks there carefully, and then look at it now. So the peaks diverge from each other. It's more defined. So that's what saturation gives you, and that's what contrast gives you. Contrast meaning the darker gets dark and the brighter gets bright. And then you may have to play around with exposure, meaning translating the graph slightly to the right so that it's bright enough for you to see. Alright, second possibility, you taken one image. How about taking multiple images and then we stack them? Stacking means you combine them together. Why is that good? And what the hell is stacking? We don't know. But excuse me. Sorry guys. There we go. So stacking. So I've talked about histogram earlier. So what stacking does is your signal to noise ratio would be improved. So if you take a single image, that's what you will get. Mostly grayish and then some color. But if you take multiple images, you can remove part of the gray and then you get all the colors right there. All the magenta, all the blue, all the cyan. So taking one image shows you something like this. So you can see the giant peaks, the distinct peaks right there. That's the signal and the noise. The signal and noise is not that different. It's about the same magnitude, order of magnitude. So what you get is that picture right there. But if you stack your pictures together, we compare. So your data is this slope up here, all the way up there, and then you can see this squiggly part. That's your noise. So your noise from as big as your data, it becomes much smaller than your data. So that simply means that that gray that we don't like is now basically gone, and you only see the colors. Oh boy. So what do you have in your pocket? So you may have smartphone, and what you can do with that, single shot astronomy, And then if you have a normal DSLR or you have a mirrorless at home, you can do the same. You can do single shot. So what single shot allows? Oh, hold on. So you can also do stacked images with camera and possibly with your smartphone, but that depends on how much time you want to spend, because usually phones these days are so good that if you take one single shot, it's actually fine. You get the colors, you get everything that you want. So single shot is something like moon pictures and landscape astrophotography. So Milky Way, or probably like wider targets and bigger targets out there. If you want to take pictures of constellation, maybe add frame so that there's a few mountains in between, so that it looks kind of nice, you know. For stacked images, you can expect landscape. So better landscape, you may get the redder hues probably. And then planetary imaging, the earlier Jupiter image, and then star trails, which is the spinny, very cool. And then you might be able to do your first deep sky object. So this would be probably Orion, and then Andromeda. Those two are really bright and should be easy enough for you to do stacked images without tracking. So now that I mentioned tracking, what is tracking? So tracking simply means that it can allow you to take even more beautiful images. You can spend even more time. So we talked about star trailing earlier. So to prevent star trail, you put your camera or your phone on a mount so it follows the sky. And when it follows the sky, you can take your single picture as long as possible, probably 1 minute or 2 minutes. And that allows you to cut down on the data size that you're working with. So, for example, that Milky Way picture took 1 hour, and each of our shots is around 30 seconds. So, ideally, it would be 1 minute or 2 minutes, so that the amount of pictures that you take is not as much. So, it's not a burden to you, because sometimes when you take so much images, so probably like 1,000 images, it can get quite hard to process them in your computer. Just a heads up, I suppose. So how much time should you expect to spend on these targets? So single shot, probably seconds, and once you start doing stacked images, you're moving into the minute regime. And you might get into the hour regime as well when you start untracked stacked images. But the moment you get into tracking, you can spend hours, or sometimes the professionals, they spend weeks on just one single image. So a few hundred hours on just one image. So I talk about tracking. So what are the different types of tracking? There's equatorial mount and then altitude azimuth mount. Equatorial mount meaning like it follows the equator. Like Earth spins, right, around the equator. So if you lock, so if you lock one of the axes towards the North Star, or probably if you're in the southern hemisphere, to the South Star, and then the sky move in and out like that. So what you want to do is, if you lock for example, this is my elbow. If you lock this to a North Star, you can follow the sky together. So that's equatorial mount. And then the second one would be altitude azimuth. Altitude meaning degree angle going upwards, so from the ground up. And then azimuth simply means, if you look at a compass, north, south, east, west, that's azimuth. So altitude azimuth meaning the way it operates is, it follows the sky in two axes. So I stay in one spot, that's my object moving around. So it will follow this curve right here. So I need to move both my legs and my arm. So that's what, yeah, we're going to demo the mounts later after this. So I'm going to go through software. So what software do you need? For astro image processing, I recommend Deep Sky Stacker and Serial. Both are very beginner friendly, easy to understand interface, and for editing your images, I recommend Darktable, which is like a free version of Lightroom or Photoshop. So everything here is free. So it should there should be little to no barrier for you guys to start. It's just that you might need sources from the internet, so I provided you with some.
Because it's just an approximation of the structure. It's kind of a safety screw so they don't actually fall out. As you can see, if I take this out, this is pretty heavy, so you can take a look at it. Just take a hold it and pass it around. This other one here as well. Of course, there are heavier weights as well. So obviously the safety screw is here so that the weight doesn't actually fall out of this pole.
You want to start just now, too?
They're the same weight. They're the same weight.
How do you know how to approach kilograms when you're setting them?
How do you know if it's a kilogram?
No, how many kilograms?
Or how many kilograms is the weight?
Yeah, like how many kilograms you put on
Actually, the most important bit is not how heavy they are, but whether they are suitable for the job. I'll show you how we're going to use this weight. So we're going to lock them here like this. This is an approximation of where to lock them. We figured out where to actually lock them. First, let's right. So the weight doesn't just go out and, let's say, hit a leg or hit someone's leg. Okay, then next. Yes. So unscrew the. No. So you can see here, this telescope has this holder which holds the telescope like this. So this essentially lets us put this, it's like this telescope tube into this bit here. So we're going to do just that. Okay, about the middle of it here. Just make sure it's balanced front and back. Approximately, don't have to be exact. Yeah, lock the main, so you lock the big bit first, the big screw, and then you lock the small screw to make sure it doesn't fall out even further.
Careful.
Right. So as you may see, there are knobs here which loosen the motion of the equatorial mount. Yes. So this one, you loosen it, it turns in this direction, and for this one, it turns in this direction. So it might differ depending on what mount you have or get. But at the moment, we want to turn it this way. Let's close it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do something called balancing. So we're going to loosen this bit. It's going this way. Lock this. Lock this part. So what we're doing here is that basically balancing, just basically balancing. So if let's say one side is heavier than the other, if let's say one of these things are loose and you don't want to just unentangle one hit a leg and then break up any little pieces. So what we're doing is balancing, so making sure that if let's say the telescope does fall, we still have enough time to catch it before it actually smashes itself to smithereens. So what you're gonna do is just, the principle of torque, you're just gonna move this bit further out, and if it's still not balanced, you're going to move this one further out as well. So for this telescope, it's somehow at the very end and it's somewhat balanced. It's not perfect. If we have heavier weights, it will be a bit more balanced, but this should do because we only have these two legs for this now. So after balancing it out, you can add this configuration. And this two will be as we just talked about. So let's say you want to point it at a star, let's say that one. You're gonna turn this, and then you're gonna turn this one at the same time. You might want to loosen both of them. so you have more flexibility for turning them around. Okay. So before I move on to this one, I actually want to first, of course, take off the cup lid. That's how the light gets in. And this thing is called a finder scope, and this is the main tube in which and this is where you put the eyepiece. So there's a main tube in which light comes in, and you're going to mainly observe through the eyepiece here. So eyepiece right here, this is 20mm eyepiece. So, for a Newtonian telescope, this is the Newtonian telescope. Light goes in through here, reflects off a concave mirror at the end of the telescope, reflects onto a 45-degree flat mirror, angle 45 degrees to the tube of the telescope, and it reflects out here through the eyepiece and converges into your eye. So that's how this Newtonian works. But first, we're going to look through the finder. So for the purpose of the finder is because since the telescope is such a large magnification, your view of the sky is going to be, let's say, this large. So finding a star through this field of view is going to be incredibly difficult. What this finder scope allows you to do is, because it has lower magnification, there's a larger field of view, which allows you to look for a star in the endless darkness of the sky. And once you center it onto the finder scope, you can switch to using the eyepiece and center it using that one. It shouldn't be too far off, depending on how big the difference in magnification is. So these wibbly bits here allows you to finely adjust the movement of the telescope in both right ascension and declination. So this one would be in the direction of this one would be in right ascension, and this one would be declination. Okay. So instead of moving them large bits at a time, you can approximately move it in this direction, aim it, and fine-tune it using these knobs here. Right. Another thing is, before you actually point at the star, you're actually gonna want to point it somewhere on the horizon. Let's say a building with bright light. Once you've kind of like know where you're pointing at, let's say a specific bright window with some some distinguishable features, or maybe even a star. You can notice a bright star if, let's say, you're in a quarter one region with no lights around you. So what you're gonna do is that you're gonna center the star or window or any bright object for that matter in the finder scope, and you're going to want to find it in the eyepiece as well. So once you center the object in the eyepiece, this thing basically has a cross section, and you're going to want to find out how off it is to the center of the cross section. So you can adjust it using these 3 screws here, so you can see it moves around. And basically, you're going to want to adjust it so that the little bright spot is directly at the center of these cross sections. So if we have a stargazing night, we might actually do this for real so far. And moving on. So depending on what kind of mount you get, it might be different. For this out-azimuth mount, for this out-azimuth mount, you will see it, and by celestron, it comes in this fashion. It might be so first thing again, you're going to want to edit and then you can bring it up to support the 3 legs. So by the way, if you're wondering what these things are basically hold the eyepiece. That's their main function. If you have a large eyepiece, or let's say an adapter, put them in a larger circle or smaller circles, so they can support them. So for this one, so you might want to have a look at the manual first, but for the celestron, you always have to do so that they are facing on the left-hand side of and same thing, you also have to so that it actually actually fits and the telescope doesn't move.
She just told me a bunch of bad words.
So for this one, how it works is I'm going to just turn this around. So this screw thing allows you to turn the azimuth direction. So you loosen it, you can turn it. This one allows you to turn it in the altitude. Yes. Okay. Same thing as before, use the final scope and eyepiece if the situation is right. But however, this one, because there is no knobs like that, like the other one, you can't actually fine tune this. So you're going to have to move large chunks at a time. So how this compensates for it is that we have, can you bring me those wires?
Because I was technical.
This is where the janky wiring comes in.
Okay. We're not actually going to plug it in.
Yeah.
No. But because it's an electronic mount, you're going to have to plug this in here to turn it on, and then you're going to have to plug this controller, which is the computer, into the auxiliary cable here. So there's a section labeled aux1 and aux2. There's also another input down here as well. So once we so how it compensates for the fine tuning is basically using machine voice instead of music. So you can it will ask you to basically align yourself to stars first, and then you're going to fine tune using the buttons. You can set the speed by pressing both speed and pressing any button to set the speed. So you can fine tune that speed as well, and it also does tracking, so it tracks the star. However, as I said before, because it's an azimuth mount, it's going to track it in a choppy way, and your picture is not going to be perfect if you take it, let's say, in a single shot. However, stacking is completely fine, as if you're doing stacking, you're going to have to take many pictures in short intervals and then stack them all together. So for short-term tracking, the image quality is actually not bad, it is still pretty good. So, however, you're getting all these lower quality pictures because there's not a sufficient amount of exposure time for each picture. However, through the process of stacking, you can essentially remove that noise and create a better image quality out of it. That's all? Yeah. So I'm gonna just no response.
So I'll take a look at these. It takes a while to sort of set up.
I'm just gonna turn it off and on again. Everyone just get around like closer.
This happens all the time, but
You're gonna have to look at the screen. If you want to sit down, that's fine as well. No? Okay. Can you all see the screen? Right, it says evolution, press enter to begin alignment, right? So for example, I'll press enter right now. And it's going to ask me to choose from several modes of alignment. So the up and down buttons are actually right here, scroll up and down. So there's sky align, the default, auto 2-star, 2-star align, 1-star align, and solar system align, EQ north align, EQ south align, sky, and back to sky align again. So you can scroll through the menu. Thank you. If you, let's say there's only 2 stars you can see in the night sky, then you want to use 2-star align. And if there's 1 star you can see, there's only 1 bright star you can see in the sky, you want to do a 1-star align. However, the most reliable way would be to do a sky align. So if you press So what this does is that after you press enter and align everything, you have to point it at, let's say, 3 stars in the sky. It tracks, and because the computer has a database in the mount and in the controller itself, it knows according to the positions of these 3 stars where you are pointing in the sky, and hence when you put puts a star in the database, it will help you find that star and track it as well. So let's say I press enter, I enter the time now. Well, I don't have to be entirely accurate, I just enter, select one standard time or daylight saving time to standard time now, so I'm just going to select standard time. Yeah, the next option is select time zone. So universal time zone -1, -2, +1, +2, and since we are UTC, we're gonna search. I'm gonna select UTC, universal time, and we're gonna select a date. So today's date, obviously, and it's gonna say using the following screen. Is that ready?
No, not yet.
No, like 30th month. Press enter to continue. So when I press enter to continue and use the following screens to select. Yeah, it's gonna scroll past quite quick slowly, but I'm gonna press enter again. So center object 1, you're gonna let's say find an object. Take care of the wire.
Yeah, I know.
You can hold it with the spent wire. This one's a bit fiddly, so the wire is and it's off.
Yeah, it happens. So this is the reality of doing stargazing.
Because they broke it the other day.
No, it's the design is
Because it was
from
already
first place.
broken. Yeah. Okay. No, it's not on.
It's not on. Then it must have been.
That's fine. I'm just gonna no response. Great. Okay.
I have to do this again.
Sometimes it does this. If
most
you
times
might
it
want to check, your mount or your wires because sometimes you don't want to pull on something you don't want to, and these things happen. Well, this one is because it's actually kind of broken down there, so it turns off randomly. So we'll be extra careful using it. Blah 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 blah. Enter. Center object 1. That's right. Okay, so you're gonna use these 4 buttons here to move the telescope around. So obviously left, right, up and down. It's pretty straightforward for this one. So once I've centered a star through the finder scope first, I'm going to press enter, and it's going to ask me to align object 1. So once I have the star centered in the finder scope, I'm going to have it centered in here using the arrow same arrow as well. Except this time it's going to move more slowly. As you can see, I'm holding on the button, but it's not really moving much. If you look inside the eyepiece, it will probably be moving a lot faster. So once you center it in the eyepiece, I'm going to press align. And I'm going to actually select object 2, so I'm just going to point it right in the direction. Align. Trajectory. Let's say it's up there. It's just random. I'm looking at things right now. Enter, align, please wait.
Are you doing
Align failed because I've randomly pointed in 3 different directions and it does not know why I'm pointing at. So that is fine. I don't see the alignment anyway. I'm just gonna go to menu, and in the menu you can see tracking. So this is where you press enter and go into it. You can press mode. It tells you whether you want it off, out as, EQ north, EQ south. So obviously we want this to be on. So we're going to go to out as because it's an out as mode. If we're going to go to EQ north, you need action as another additional key. So usually for this mount, there is a wedge you can buy. The wedges is between this stand, this tripod right here, and the actual mount itself. So once the wedge is in there, the basic function will in the direction of the ecliptical. So I'm gonna go back because we're already in tracking mode. If you go down, there's a lot of other menu items you can choose as well, hand control utilities. You can explore this in your own time. What you're going to discover is go to RA declination. So if you RA declination coordinates, you can enter it, and the telescope will try to find where it is. And identify, which you point at the star, and identify what stellar object approximately what it is. And precise go to, which is what we use most of the time. So you enter this, there's no alignment, that's why I can't do it. It's fine, you can turn it off now. So for go to, it just tells you, because this type of mount, again, electronic, it's called interval. So when you put in a specific object you want to go to that object, so you point yourself to the object. Say you're going to find it, and especially if the object is thin, you might also you don't have to find it through the finder. Let's say if the light polluted and environment and you can't actually see the star with your eyes, you might want to use the finding mechanism to find the star. So this is our telescope. We have two of these currently. So this is a Schmidt Cassie ray. It functions like a normal Cassie ray. Light goes into here, bounces off a concave mirror at the end, and then bounces off a convex mirror so as you can see, there is a circle in the front. So that is where the convex mirror is held. And once the light bounces off the concave mirror back, bounces off the mirror in the front and into the eyepiece. By the way, if you've ever wondered why there's an L-shaped eyepiece here, it's because if you want to plug it somewhere else, you want to have a look through the eyepiece. Because obviously your face can't be here. So the L-shaped L-piece really comes in and gives you this. And when you put the L-piece in, yeah, you can also change directions. It makes it easier. And as for this telescope, yeah, I haven't shown you guys the secondary mirror yet, but it's located. That's the mirror right there, the secondary mirror. At the back, you can see the primary mirror. Reflects on the secondary mirror and out into your eyes. So, by the way, one more thing is that for telescopes like these, that one doesn't have this function, but you can just take off one of these caps and it's essentially a smaller aperture. The only reason you ever want to do this is you're looking at a bright object. So for example, the sun or the moon. Let's say if the moon is too bright for the light, you can take off, you can basically put the cover on, take out one of the covers, and you can still see the moon, but at a much lower resolution and brightness. As for looking at the sun, obviously never point a telescope at the sun like that. One, you're going to need a solar filter, so you can have a solar filter. Let's say solar filters are expensive. So let's say you just want to use a small part of the solar filter. You can put it on here and you can still see the sun the same. Or you can just make one bigger one for the whole telescope if you like. Than just stars in the star chart. So for stars, the larger, there's a legend up here which tells you the larger the star is as displayed on the star chart, the brighter it is. The smaller it is, the dimmer it is, as evidence here. So it says, up here it says magnitudes from -2 to 6. So magnitudes increase in a decreasing fashion. So the lower the magnitude, the brighter the star is. Is it face down? And this is a comparison. For you guys, if you're taking physics, you might know what absolute magnitude is. But this comes from the star chart. So you're going to be using your eyes and you're going to be based on Earth. Hopefully, I think. I'm not sure. And you might notice that there are other things other than stars. So stars are those black. So it looks, in this say random spot, let's say, so on the right hand side, so the right most part of the right hand side, you might see 5 comma variances, and next to it are a bunch of overs. So if you notice the legend, the overs actually have galaxies. So each of these shapes, strange, yeah, basically strange shaped overs, miscolored pixels, or chromosomes, which are all the legend below or above the page. Tells you that there's a deep sky object with that designation in that area. So for example, here there's can find M65, you can find M68, M stands for Messier, which is named after Charles Messier, who cataloged a total of 100.
Yeah, but I want to do something.
113, 117, something objects. So that's called the Messier catalog. Mainly 2 types of catalogs you know about. One is the Messier one, and the second one will be the new general catalog. Of course, there's a few more catalogs, two catalogs, but you're going to mostly know what is this one. Most of what I said also applies to North and South equatorial region. So you have dates on the side, you have declination lines and right ascension lines. Mind you, these are declination lines? Yes, yes. Yes, declination lines and ascension lines. Sorry, I think I say something wrong earlier. So the equatorial mountain is not based on the sun, but instead on the equator of the Earth. So for an horizon, so as you know, the sun, the Earth is tilted about. What's the tilt of the Earth's axis? Yes. So the Earth is tilted to 3.5 on its axis, okay, relative to the sun. So tilted in this fashion, we have fixed about fixed direction as it moves across the sun. So this basically, how do I demonstrate this? It's like, for example, on the equator of the Earth is moving in this direction relative to the stars beyond the sun, like across the sun in this direction, right? So according to the seasons, they will be different, and hence you have this smooth basic equator, and that's why we have the equator because if you're going to base it on the horizon, it's going to change every season as it moves across the sun. The stars will be all in different positions every time. One more thing what was it again? Something else I forgot. I don't remember what it is. I actually don't remember what I was going well, not exactly what I remember what I was going to talk about, but if let's say you're going to do amateur astronomy, you're going to observe with your eyes. Let's say you want to find the distance between this star and this star. You can calculate it based on the star chart. However, in the night sky, it's going to be very difficult to tell how far it is apart without, let's say, a proper measuring tool. So you can approximate this way. So if you stick your arm out as far as you can and stick your little finger out, this is approximately from left to right of the finger. It's approximately 1 degree in the sky. And for 3 fingers together, it will be 5 degrees. For fists, approximately 10 degrees apart. And for this, 15 degrees. So that's an approximation we want to use if we want to, let's say, determine the approximate angular distance between the stars. There's a few more things that we can actually talk about on this topic, but you might touch some of them. Let's say if we have stargazing. So one more thing is that you don't want white light or blue light during observation. You want to keep your eyes generally focused and adjusted to the dark. So you know when you look at the bright light, let's say that one, you look away, you get a blue blob in front of your eyes. Yes? So let's say look at the light, okay? Then look back at, let's say, a dark surface or your hands. You see a blue blob in front of your eyes. So that's the eye adjusting and basically saving the image of the light and somehow adjust and just take some time to adjust to, let's say, a lower light environment. So what you're gonna do is when you're looking at these star charts is that you always want to have a red torchlight or set your phone to a red light mode. So when you set your red light mode or have a red torchlight and looking at stuff through a red torchlight, it doesn't stimulate your eye as much, and generally would be fine. You won't have these blue blobs which obstruct your field of view, because if you're going to look at stars, you're going to have unobstructed field of view to the stars. One more thing is that I keep adding one more thing. I keep thinking of things last minute. So for some of you might not be able to look at stars, depending on if you have, let's say, visual deficiency, for example, night blindness. And for some of you that might not be the case, but one thing you need to know is that you have cones and rods in your eyes. And cones, I believe, are sensitive to just just objects like light, and rods to color. So you have a lot more cones than rods in your eyes. So when you're looking at a star, not really rated, but if you're looking at the star, sometimes you can't exactly see where it is, even through the telescope. If it's like a really faint star. If you're trying to look for a star, sometimes the best way to look at it is to not look directly at it, but instead away from it in a dark spot, like the dark region. I'm not exactly sure why the reason for this is like that, but it's something to do with how your eye functions and how it focuses light. And somehow looking away from it can help you find the star easier than it were if it were than for directly at it. It might be because it's in some kind of blind spot. You can look directly at it. So depends on what kind of star is and how you're looking at it. You can find stars easily that way. Oh yes, I know what I was talking about. Go to North Circumpolar region and South Circumpolar region respectively.
Thank you, thank you.
You can see there's this circle around where the pole is. So that brings me on to the next topic of precession. It's kind of physics, maths, so I'm not going to explain what precession exactly is, but to put it simply, precession is basically the spin of the Earth's axis in a wobbly state. So the Earth doesn't exactly spin around the Sun 23.5 degrees, 23.5 degrees away from it. It's going to spin slightly on the axis. So the spin is represented here by this circle. So this circle represents a 40,000 year cycle in which the true north of the Earth changes along the course of 40,000 years. So for example, in let's see, about 10, let's say about 40,000.
Oh, nice.
Sorry, no, I think about 20 something thousand years. Yeah. So you can see there is some dates along this line, and it says orbit of the precession of the pole, so it orbits in a anti-clockwise direction. And you can see dates on them. So the dates tell you where true north is at that date. So for example, you find 4000 BC, 4600 BC, 8400 AD, and 14800 AD. So it tells you where true north will be on those dates, years, basically. So few thousand years ago, which is about when the Greeks would have been observing the night sky, it would have been approximately in this location. So Tuban at the time would have been a north star. Tuban is a star in Draco.
Yes.
It would have been a north star rather than Polaris right now. So just process it slowly, basically north star changes and the whole star chart is basically you have to change it every few like several decades or even several centuries. So this entire star chart is based on Julian calendar